You keep telling yourself you're not the chosen type because you don't feel special, you don't feel brave, and you don't feel pure. That belief sounds humble, but it can be a disguise for fear. The Quran doesn't teach that closeness to Allah is reserved for people with dramatic stories. It teaches that Allah raises whom He wills in ways you may not predict and in places you may not announce. If you're waiting to feel like a saint before you take your next step, you've accepted a false condition. The truth is harsher and more liberating. Allah can single a person out by removing them from what they depended on, and that removal isn't proof you were abandoned, it's proof you were being exposed. In that exposure, the question is never, am I chosen? It is, what is Allah showing me about who I really am? Here's the part most people twist. They interpret removal as humiliation, as if losing a role, a friend group, a platform, a city, or a relationship is Allah declaring you unworthy. They read the empty seat and assume the story ended, so they scramble to refill the space with anything that dulls the ache. But there's another reading that feels uncomfortable because it demands responsibility. In the stories of the righteous, Allah's care is not always wrapped in comfort. Sometimes it arrives as separation, not because the person is better than others in a loud way, but because Allah is merciful enough to not let them stay trapped in a version of themselves that survives on approval. And people will call it bad luck or a downfall. Yet you might be watching a mercy unfold, one that cuts off your old identity so your real one can finally stand on its own. The psychological mechanism is simple and ruthless. We outsource our sense of worth to what reflects us back. A job title, a spouse's attention, a community's praise, a family's expectations, even the feeling of being needed, these become mirrors. When the mirrors are removed, the face feels like it disappears. That's why a person panics after loss, not because the loss itself is unbearable, but because the self they curated depended on that thing to exist. Islam doesn't deny this weakness. It directs it. It tells you to anchor yourself in Allah because everything else is temporary by design. When Allah pulls away a mirror, He isn't playing games. He's asking whether you will cling to the reflection or finally learn to stand without it. Imagine a concrete scene. It's late evening. Your phone screen is the only light in the room, and you're staring at a message that ends a chapter without debate. I don't think we should continue. No long explanation, no dramatic fight, just a clean cut. You sit up, heart racing, and the first dua that rises isn't even about healing. It's about bargaining. Ya Allah, bring them back. I'll do better. I'll change. Then the room goes quiet, and you realize how much of your worship had turned into negotiation, how much of your patience depended on the promise that Allah would give you the exact thing you wanted. That moment is not pretty, but it is revealing. It shows you where you were worshipping Allah for Allah and where you were worshipping Allah for a gift. A counterexample matters here because not every loss is a spiritual promotion, and not every separation is a sign of favor. Some people lose something because they were careless, unjust, or arrogant. Some people are removed because they insisted on harm. Islam is honest about consequences, and it doesn't romanticize every hardship. Yet, look at the contrast. Two people lose the same thing, and one becomes softer, more truthful, more disciplined, while the other becomes bitter, louder, and more entitled. The event is similar. The inner response exposes the heart. If removal reveals you as more sincere, more humble, more careful with your tongue, more dependent on Allah than on people, then the loss carried a mercy. If it reveals you as resentful and hungry for revenge, then the loss carried a warning. Either way, Allah has shown you something you were refusing to see. There's another layer that people miss. The outward, chosen look is often the opposite of what's happening. Someone who is being prepared by Allah might appear strange to others, less social, less interested in trends, less impressed by status games. People might say you're falling behind, becoming isolated, wasting your potential. They won't see that Allah sometimes removes a servant from noise so the servant can hear. They won't see that a person can be protected by being disliked, saved by being misunderstood, elevated by being ignored. Meanwhile, someone else might be praised everywhere and still be drifting. Because applause can be a curtain. When Allah pulls you out, the crowd interprets it as exile, but the believer learns to consider it as a private appointment. Everyday life gives small versions of this. You walk into a gathering and realize the seat you used to have is taken, not because anyone hates you, but because you were never as central as you imagined. It stings. Then you notice something sharper. The conversations are shallow, the jokes are cruel, the envy is casual, the prayers are rushed, the backbiting is served like tea. You used to laugh along to feel included, and now you feel like a stranger. That discomfort is not a personality flaw. It can be Allah cleaning your appetite. If you had stayed comfortable there, you would have kept eating from a table that was poisoning your heart. Removal can be protection, dressed as loneliness. And loneliness can be the first honest room you've sat in for years. Nuance is necessary, because removal isn't always external. Sometimes Allah doesn't take you out of a place. He takes the sweetness out of it. You still have the job, but the pride fades. You still have the social circle, but the excitement dies. You still have the same routines, but something inside refuses to be entertained by them. People assume you're depressed, and you might even think so, but sometimes it's a spiritual recalibration. When dunya loses its flavor, it can be Allah making space in you for something cleaner. This is where sincerity is tested, because without the emotional reward, you either keep obeying Allah out of devotion, or you abandon the path because the feeling left. Many people confuse the loss of thrill with the loss of guidance, and they run back to what Allah was trying to drain from them. Enoch is often mentioned as a symbol of being taken away, but the lesson isn't that Allah will lift you into a dramatic sky and everyone will finally recognize your worth. The lesson is that Allah can remove you from what you thought defined you, and in that removal, your true state becomes visible. If you were kind only when loved, it will show. If you were faithful only when things were easy, it will show. If you were generous only when praised, it will show. And if you were sincere in private, if you feared Allah when no one watched, if you held your tongue when you could have destroyed someone, that will show too. Allah's unveiling is not primarily for the public, it is for you. So you stop lying to yourself with religious slogans while your heart clings to other gods. The ending is quieter than the fantasy. Allah may remove you, and the world may continue without noticing. No farewell speech, no vindication, no poetic montage, just a door closing and your footsteps echoing in a hallway you didn't choose. That is when you learn what you were really depending on. The person who was built on attention will collapse. The person who was built on Allah will ache, then stand. And you won't need to announce what happened, because the proof won't be a story you tell. It will be the person you become when the mirror is gone and only Allah remains watching.